We're going to be in Daniel chapter 2 today, and I don't know how far we'll get. I've got slides that's more of a teaser, goes all the way to chapter 6, but I don't expect we get past chapter 4. So the book is really, we covered chapter 1 last week. Chris brought us the sort of the chapter 1 is that background chapter. And I had a really delightful friend who's gone on to his reward. And he used to say, you know, there's shelf space here. There's a reason why it's in here. God doesn't take up shelf space for no good reason. And I think he's right. This book gives us some stories that are faith-building, but it also gives us an overarching kind of prophecy, a series of prophecies that we know have come true that are spectacular in building faith. Uniquely verified through archaeology, not that we have to have it, but it's delightful when it happens. And at the same time, we see the application of faith in real time among characters that are referred to by action anyway, if not by name, in the New Testament. So, as we do, it's just I just love this book. I love the character, the person of Daniel. Joseph is a wonderful person. There's not much to be said of bad about Joseph. I think you have to sort of struggle to imply, maybe. But his sibling relations could have been better, right? But Daniel, he just takes that up a notch. There's like nothing badly referred to or inferred of Daniel. I mean, he is just a spectacular person. And there have been wonderful people throughout Scripture that we could identify with, but he is a beautiful spirit and a wonderful example for us. The overview I just give you, I'm not going to spend any time on it except to say as a reference, if you have this by email, we will be happy to refer to it in concept. But it seems to me that chapters 1 through 6 are more of a biographical account. There's some prophecy within it, but he's interpreting it. He's a part of the prophecy. So he's not acting just as a prophetic thing or apocalyptic language and that kind of thing. He's actually living it and explaining it to the king. And so it's biographical. It gets you up to speed on these three friends of his and himself. And then chapters 7 through 12, it's a little more symbolic language and all prophetic. And then sometimes it's helpful, and Chris did a good job of explaining the timing and the ages and that type of thing, but it's kind of hard for us to remember that there were three waves, because we don't identify with this. It seems like an academic history. But it is helpful, I think, to understand that there were three waves of people taken from Jerusalem and Judea and taken into Babylonian captivity. So the three waves begin in 605. And Jehoiakim, also known as Eliakim, depending on what the situation is in Scripture from the Chronicles or the Kings. And you'll have Jehoiakim is reigning at the time of this captivity, at this first wave, where they take away the young guys, the nobles, the descendants of the kings, the royals, the young ones that could be brought off to be trained, as we studied last week. And we see the training that the four boys went through. And then in chapter 2, we finally get into some interesting prose. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, chapter 2, verse 1, let's read it. Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. You ever had sleep so bad, or a dream so disturbing that you couldn't sleep the rest of the evening? It doesn't happen that often. I hope it doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen that often to me anyway. Then the king gave the command to all the magicians and astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans and to tell the king his dreams, so that they stood before the king. And the king said to them, I've had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. What happened? Same thing happens to me. Maybe it happens to you. I forget what a dream, but I remember it was a big dream. You ever had that? Come down for breakfast, talk to your husband or your wife, and say, man, I had this dream. For the life of me, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it was a big dream. It woke me up and it disturbed me, but now I can't remember exactly how it went. And then we try to tell it, and we know we're not telling it quite right. And that's what happened to him. He had this dream, and it kind of left him as to what it was, but he remembered it was a really important thing. So by the time we get to verse 4, the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. Why in Aramaic? It's a Semitic language. It's very similar to Hebrew, very similar to Arabic. Now, if you tell an Arab that Hebrew sounds a lot like Arabic, it would be like telling a New Yorker that a Georgian accent is very similar. They would take offense. But the reality is, the languages are very, very similar. Some words are cognates, like peace and greeting. It's the same word in all three languages. Well, at any rate, the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. Aramaic was this unifying royal courtly kind of language that they used throughout the empire whenever they were going to have an edict come from Babylon out to the hinterlands. It was in Aramaic. And so it was a royal kind of a language. And so this is the one they spoke, and this is the language in which these chapters are written. So how many of us participated with little Bible challenge or little facts or whatever, and we were brought up, when we were young, or we were the teacher, and we peppered the little children when they came forward, and we sang songs, and we said, how many writers of the Bible and over how many periods of time, and maybe we said how many languages. Old Testament's written in Hebrew and New Testament's written in Greek, and some smart aleck kid says, and Aramaic. And so we just give that one a candy bar and tell them to go away. So that's how I got so fat. So we have this situation where it's in the royal language. So the Chaldeans were the upper crust. The Chaldeans are the ones that went to the Ivy League schools within the empire. The Chaldeans are the ones who invented the 360-degree system. Every aviator, every navigator, every seaman understands 60 degrees, 6 times over. Eric knows what I'm talking about. So when you go out, 1 degree of error on that radio is not working right, and you're out 60 miles, how much error have you got? This is the Chaldean way. It is geometry and mathematics wrapped into one. And why were they so focused on it? Because they look at the stars, and one of their gods was Astro. And we get the word astrology, right? Astrophysics, astrology. Not necessarily religious, right? But to look at the stars. They had to invent a 360 circle system to be able to refer to it. Anyway, they were very, very advanced. We use their geometry and their math even today. And these Chaldeans spoke in a different language than the regular people. Much as if you go to Oxford, they may speak in Latin and sort of have their nose up in the air when they do it. O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation. So he had forgotten the dream. His request, though, his command is to tell me the dream. And so they give back to him in the most courtly, we miss it in between the lines. They give it back to him in the most uppity. Think of your highest uppity Oxford English. That's what they're giving him. You tell us, O king, live forever. You tell us the dream, and we'll tell you the explanation. And that is not what he was willing to do. So, verse 5. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, what does he say? You'll be cut in pieces. So much for the sophistry, so much for the certifications, so much for the diplomas, the degrees. He's going to bring it down to the common denominator. You're going to die. I don't care what your degrees are in. I don't care how courtly your language is. You're going to die if you don't tell me the dream. I'm going to cut you into pieces. This is very vulgar, very violent, ugly. Your houses will be made an ash heap. However, if you tell me the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. And you could just see the force behind it. Nebuchadnezzar was not a guy to be trifled with. Then they answered and said, let the king, I bet you it was a lot less august in this second response. Oh, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we'll tell his interpretation. And the king answered and said, I know for certain that you would gain time. You're going to just delay and delay because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. So he figures they'll just swindle him into changing his mind. Therefore, tell me the dream, and you shall know that I shall know that you can give me its interpretation. If you can tell me the dream, I'll trust that you get the interpretation right. So the Chaldeans answered the king, well, there is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. We can't do that. Therefore, no king, lord, ruler has ever asked for such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. So they are begging him. They're reasoning with him. They're trying to pit him against all the people he's conquered over the years. And they finally say, it's a difficult thing that the king requests. That's an understatement. And there is no other who can tell it to the king except, and then they go to paganism, right? No one other than the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Well, they got some of that right. For this reason, the king was angry, he was very furious, and he gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out, and they began killing the wise men. Understand, this is not next Friday we'll begin the killings. It happened right then. They started the process. And it might have been that the guy that was talking to him was the first one. I don't know. They started the process of killing the wise men right then. They began killing the wise men. And they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. He was in that mix. He was a part of the courtiers. He was part of the crew that was well educated and was there to serve the court of the throne room, the affairs of state, the things that happen at the palace. We go on to verse 14. And then the counsel and the wisdom of Daniel answered Arioch. He's the captain of the king's guard who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. And he answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Why is the decree so urgent? And then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. It was an immediate thing. So Daniel, in verse 16, he went in and he asked the king to give him time. The very thing the king said he wouldn't do, right? So his faithfulness, his power, his already a relationship capital, we might say. You know, the friendship that he'd already developed, the reputation, the credibility, whatever you want to call it. It's implied here that he could actually have this relationship with the king in such a way that he could go before the king and that he might tell the king its interpretation after begging for a little bit of time. Then Daniel went to his house, and he made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven concerning the secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. When good things happen to you, I mean, more than a really great meal, although that's a great time to do it too, but do we give God thanks for something good happening? When the thing got healed and we prayed that it would? When the child was born without problems and we prayed that it would? When we found that job? When we fill in the blank? When something good happens, do we give God the thanks for it? Do we bless God? And that's exactly what God did to Daniel. He answered his prayer. Other thing you can kind of get from this, he asked a very specific thing. Do we ask God very specific things? Or we just do this, paint with a broad brush. We can do that. I'd rather know that each of us prayed to God with a broad brush than that we didn't pray. But, wow, what a blessing it is to pray for a specific thing to happen. That the heart of this person be open. That the door of that opportunity be open. Specifically, the person, the situation. So that God, if he answers the prayer, then we know. Oh, that's not just a coincidence. God answered the prayer. We give God praise for it. We thank him for it. Well, those are just practical applications of it. All right, chapter 2 and verse 20. So Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes the times and the seasons. And he removes kings and he raises up kings." This is interesting. This is his preamble to the king, is it? So this is what he tells Nebuchadnezzar, the king of kings. He says he raises up kings, he removes kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells in him. What does John say? God is light, in whom there is no darkness at all. God gives light. He is light. God is love. Light is love. Light and love are tied. God and light are tied. When we walk in the light, we're tied with God. And this is the reference that he makes. The light dwells with him. I thank you and I praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might and have made known to me what we asked of you. The specific prayer was answered. For you have made known to us the king's demand. And therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. And he went and he said thus to him, "Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king," it's the interpretation, "make known to the king the interpretation." And the king answered and said to Daniel, so apparently he was successfully brought before him. He said to Daniel, whose name they renamed him Belteshazzar, "Are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation?" And Daniel, he answered in the presence of the king and said, now watch this. Who does he place this on? See how how wise he is, how God gave him wisdom. He says, in answering the king, he says, the secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers, they cannot declare to the king, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. There's a God in heaven that reveals secrets. And he has made known to me. Is that what Daniel says? He's made known to me? No. Isn't this nice? See how humble he is? Oh, he has made known to you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Can you see how different that is? He's made known this secret. He's made known to Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. You and I are living in the latter days. This is a long time ago. This is in the 500s BC, and now we are 2023. You know, it's been a long time ago. 2,500 years ago. We were still living in it. The latter days begin, in the first century. Okay, so your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. He tells them the dream, not just the interpretation. As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. But as for me, this secret, it's not been revealed to me. It's not been revealed to me because I have more wisdom than anyone living. But for our sakes, he prayed, right? For our sakes, who made known the interpretation to the king, and so that you wouldn't kill us, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart. So he's doing a service for the king to benefit the king, so the king could not be anxious about this dream that he couldn't remember. Here it is. You, O king, were watching. You were watching, and behold, a great image, and this great image, whose splendor was excellent. It stood before you, and its form was awesome. This was a word used before it was used when you get a cup of coffee. Awesome. No, awe. Full of awe. Oh, that'd be awful. Let's see. Some awe. All right. Awesome. This image, its head was fine gold, and its chest and arms silver, and its belly and thighs were bronze, and its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. And you watched while the stone. So go to the chart, and you'll see down the left column, you end up with a stone. It's pushing towards a stone. What is that stone? That's the Messiah. That stone is the kingdom of Christ. That stone will crush all these others. That stone will rule the world. That stone is special. It will be a stone. Well, we'll get into that in just a second. So, what does it say? He goes on, he says, you watched while the stone was cut out without hands. We would say without being hewn, like, hammer and sharp piece of steel. Not hewn out stone. That's an important thing. We'll get to another scripture in just a minute. Which struck the image on its feet, and iron and clay, and broke them into pieces. And then the iron and the clay and the bronze and the silver and the gold crushed together and became like chaff in the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone, that's what we're leading to, the stone that struck the image became a great mountain, began with the seed of a mustard seed, right? And it blossomed, it grew up, it became huge. The church, the kingdom of Christ. And it filled the whole earth. Is there any place where the gospel has not gone? Is there any place where people have not obeyed the gospel? Any geography? This is the dream. Now, I'm going to give you the explanation, the interpretation, verse 36. He says, now We will tell the interpretation of it before the king. Isn't it interesting? He uses the third person there. We will tell. He doesn't ever say I. He gets out of that me and I. You, O king, are a king of kings. This is Nebuchadnezzar. He is special. There is no king referred to him on earth ever in Scripture like Nebuchadnezzar. Never. O king, you are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, glory, wherever the children of men dwell. That'd be like all humans. Anybody, any place where there are people. Wherever the children of men dwell, or beasts of the field, or birds of the heaven, he, God, has given them unto your hand, into your hand, and has made you ruler over them. You are its head of gold. That's quite a statement. Now that could cause a guy to maybe get the big head, right? Next chapter. We'll wait for that one. All right. So, but after you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours, and then another, third kingdom of bronze, and which shall rule over the earth, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, and inasmuch as the iron breaks into pieces and shatters everything, the iron that crushes that kingdom will break into pieces and crush all others. What kingdom is that? Verse 41. Whereas you saw the feet and the toes and the partly potter's clay and partly of iron, and kingdom was divided, and the strength of the iron shall be in it. But just as you saw the iron mixed with the ceramic clay, the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly fragile. And as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay, they shall mingle with the seed of men. But they will not adhere to one another, just as an iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, that's a very important verse. So chapter 2, verse 44 is a verse you should highlight. You should star. In the days of these kings, that will help you understand that he's not talking about what happens in China, what happens in Russia, what happens in Ukraine, what happens in modern events. That is not what he's talking about. Chapter 2, verse 44 is a very important verse. In the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed. Sound like the church. Sounds like my kingdom is not of this world. That's Christ. God will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to another people. It shall break in pieces and consume all kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. And inasmuch as you have seen the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. And what mountain could that be? Mount Zion, maybe? He was cut out not with hands. And it was broken. It broke into pieces the iron and the clay and the bronze and silver and gold. A great God has made known to the king. This is the great secret that's being revealed. The great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. In the future, is what he's saying. So, the dream is certain. Its interpretation is sure. The king couldn't argue with the interpretation because he revealed the same dream that he recalled after he heard it. That was proof in the pudding, as we would say. So, he didn't know what his dream was. He couldn't remember it. Have you ever had a dream where you recalled it later? I have. Something happens and I go, I don't remember that dream now. That's what he recalls a dream. Daniel, miraculously, through God's putting it in him, giving him the understanding, tells him what the dream is. He knows that it's certain. It comports to his remembrance of it as he's able to retrieve it. And what was Nebuchadnezzar's reaction? King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, verse 46. Think about that. He fell on his face prostrate before Daniel. I bet that never happened before. He fell on his face prostrate before Daniel, and he commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. Now, Daniel probably didn't have much he could say about it, but anyway, the king answered Daniel and said, "Truly your God is the God of God of gods." He says this to Daniel. "Truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret." Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. That'd be the capital city area, kind of the District of Columbia for Babylon. And chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. So he got to take care of his friends who were in that role. That's kind of nice. Verse 49, also Daniel petitioned the king and set Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Not only could he take care of them, he appointed them. They ascended in power and authority to carry out government. But Daniel, he wasn't with those three. He wasn't in that function. Where was he? Daniel sat at the gate of the king. So he's like right there with the king, right at his right hand, all the time. Very interesting. Time will not allow us. In chapter 7 and chapter 8, chapter 9, we're going to get into some of these similarities between the dreams and the images that are used. Very similar. But not today. All right. So, you may not be able to read this, pretty small font. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 25, I'd like to talk about this stone, this rock that is referred to in the dream and its interpretation. A rock and stone is a big deal to God. God has used this over and over again. So I get the best. This is not my depiction. Alyssa was not solicited for this. She would have done a better job probably. But I plucked this, and it shows a rock coming to take out the feet of these empires. So the rock, this stone, is Christ. This stone is the church. And it will be a kingdom that goes on forever, according to the interpretation of the dream. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 25, I'll read to you the text there. "If you make me an altar of stone and shall not build it of hewn stone," don't take a tool to it. "For if you use a tool on it, you have profaned it." So there was a special reference in the interpretation that this stone would not be hewn. It will not be profaned. It will not be of human hands. And I think that's important. And God uses this imagery also much earlier than this, in Exodus 20, before they ever go into Babylonian captivity. Well, Matthew 7:24 writes it this way. I'm just going to bring the rock or the stone to our remembrance. He says, "Therefore, whoever hears the sayings of mine," Jesus speaking, does them, "I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock." You see how it keeps on showing up. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 11. "For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Christ Jesus." What do we lay foundations on? Rock. Solid. What was the solid conviction of Peter? "Who do you say that I am?" Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. "I say that you're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "On this rock I will build my church." On this statement that you are the Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one, the one that would come, the one that would establish the kingdom, the one that answers the interpretation that was prophesied so many years ago. Isaiah chapter 8, verse 14 says this. "It is written, behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling block and a rock of offense. Whoever believes on him will not be put to shame." Believes on the rock. Lay in Zion, that mountain that's referred to. How about Isaiah 51? "Listen to me. you who follow after righteousness, you who seek the Lord, look to the rock which you were hewn. The rock wasn't hewn, you were hewn. God did the hewing. And look to that. What's happening to us as a result? You see it from 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Moreover, brethren, I don't want you to be unaware. I like the King James. I have you know, ignorant brethren. I don't want you to be unaware that your fathers were under the cloud, and they passed into the sea and were baptized in Moses in the cloud of the sea, and they ate the same spiritual food and all drank the same spiritual drink, and they drank of the spiritual rock. The rock, they did in the old covenant, in the wilderness, they drank of the rock, the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Romans 16, verse 20, and the God of peace will crush Satan under your feet shortly. Grace of God, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you. This rock is to crush that kingdom. He's translated us out of the kingdom of darkness and into the kingdom of his dear Son. Well, many things could be said. Now let's go into chapter 3. Chapter 3 of Daniel. Wonderful situation. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold. It was 90 feet tall, 60 cubits. We don't know exactly, but think of it that way. And the king sent word to gather everybody and anybody that's anybody. The administrators, the governors, the satraps, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces, and come to the dedication of, what's the dedication of? The image that is erected is that of King Nebuchadnezzar, that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And so they brought all those people in. Let's skip down to, let's go to verse 8. Therefore, at the time certain, when the trumpet would blow, the sound would be made, everybody was supposed to bow down. And therefore, at a certain time, the Chaldeans came forward and they accused the Jews. You know, they were kind of uppity, as we said, right? They accused these lowly, barely educated captives from a foreign place. They didn't go to Oxford. What did they say? Come forward and accuse them. And they spoke to the king. They said, "O king," have they ever said this before? "O king, live forever." In their uppity Aramaic. "You, O king, have made a decree that anyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, the psalmistry, in symphony, in all the kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image, the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace." One had already been created. One was already available. A lot of effort went to the design. This is not like the way I do cookouts. You want to cook out? Okay, let's see if I can get something going here. 15 minutes later, we get something that resembles a charred burger. That's not what happened. They've carefully designed this fiery furnace. At the time they carefully designed the erection of this, they had a carefully designed celebration. They had a carefully designed orchestra ready to go. They did all these things very much by design. And there were certain Jews whom had been set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Do you think they maybe had an agenda? They were sick and tired of these Jews to come in and be over them, to govern over them. Daniel and his 3 friends to be set over them in the capital city. That's exactly what was going on. And these Chaldeans had had enough. They found a way to get it done. Coming chapters, we're going to find they're not the only ones that do this, right? All right. So they bring charges against these 3. And we know the story, but it's good to read the words, because the exact wording is pretty interesting. So they have not paid you due regard. They do not serve your gods. They don't say our gods. They put it on the king. They haven't served your gods, King Nebuchadnezzar. Or they don't worship your image. So they broadened it to be beyond that which is related to this bowing down of this image. They are not bowing down to that which that you set up. And then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, so that they brought these before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar spoke and saying, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I set up? Now, if you're ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn." So he tries to give them an out. Hey, okay, we'll just forget it all. You just go ahead and bow down. It'll be all right. Well, we know the story. All right, so this is the response. If it's the case that our God will, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning furnace, he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you. This is real defiance. Let it be known to you, O king, we will not serve your gods, nor will we worship the God, this golden image that you've set up before us. Now, why would they be so adamant about this? Exodus chapter 20 makes it very clear. Exodus 20, by the finger of God on tablets of stone, this is what he says: "I am the Lord thy God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me." That's the first commandment. First commandment, no other gods before me. Second commandment, particularly applicable to what the situation is. You shall not make any graven image, even a 90-foot one, even a gold one, or a likeness of anything on heaven and earth, below the earth. All right, verse 5. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them. That's exactly what was asked for. They couldn't do this. This is a violation of the first and second. Oh, you got to listen to this now. This is good. What are the three things that in Daniel 3, things that were never, 7 or 8 things, that were never uttered by these guys? Did they say, well, we weren't looking for any trouble. Everybody else is doing it. Surely it doesn't matter that much. God wouldn't send us to hell for doing that little thing. We're only going to do it once. Does it really matter? God knows our hearts. No, we bow down to public opinion on matters of marriage. We often will consent to consumerism and materialism. We will offer our children in the hopes of a better life to the altar of wicked education and all kinds of things. We do this. We need to be accountable to ourselves in light of the perfect law of liberty. Look into it and see where we need to change. Not bow down and disobey. Chapter 4, I guess you're going to do 4, 5, and 6 next week? Or, I am? Oh, perfect. I know the guy will cover it next week, Lord willing. All right, so be here and we'll get through, at least through, how far? You're supposed to get through 9. Oh, okay. Yes, sure we will. So read through chapter 9. A lot of very complicated prophecy coming up. But the things that we learned from their obedience, wow, powerful. Please make sure that you're getting copies of these via email. And they might be a great reference. I love this guy. He is a fantastic man. Gabriel calls him, what does Gabriel call him? Thou art greatly beloved. Gabriel doesn't say that about anybody else that we have recorded anyway. Anyway, you're all greatly beloved too. Come back next week. Thank you.